There comes a time in life when the mirror reflects more than wrinkles. It reflects stories, battles, and silent regrets. You have lived, loved, lost, and endured. Yet somewhere along the way, something shifts. The phone rings less. The visits grow shorter. People begin to drift, not out of cruelty, but out of quiet exhaustion. And you wonder, when did I become difficult to love? But aging is not the problem. The real weight lies in the habits we carry, habits that slowly close the doors of connection. The Buddha taught that suffering does not come from life itself, but from our clinging to anger, to pride, to the need to be right, to the illusion that the world owes us something. These invisible attachments become walls around the heart, turning wisdom into arrogance, care into control, and memory into bitterness. Yet there is another path. Old age, when lived with awareness, can become the most radiant chapter of your life, not a decline, but a distillation. This is the time to release what poisons your peace, to let compassion replace complaint, gratitude replace expectation, and dignity replace despair. In this reflection, we will walk through 13 hidden habits that quietly push love away, and the Buddhist truths that can bring it back. Each one is a chance to return to stillness, to humility, to the grace of being fully alive. Because growing old is inevitable, but becoming cold is not. Stay with me. This journey is not about how to live longer, but how to live lighter, and to rediscover, in your final seasons, the quiet majesty of being loved, respected, and free. Part 1. Complaining. There is a quiet poison that seeps into many hearts as the years unfold the habit of constant complaint. You may not even notice when it begins. A small irritation here, a disappointment there. The soup is too cold, the news is too dark, the children never call enough. Slowly, conversation becomes less a bridge and more a dumping ground, a place to offload dissatisfaction rather than to share peace. But complaint is not communication. It is the echo of resistance, resistance to what is. The Buddha once said, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete." Yet constant complaining is a form of self-violence. It reopens the wound of every imperfection and trains the mind to search for what's missing instead of what's present. Think of a pond. When stirred by the stick of judgment, the water becomes cloudy, unable to reflect the moon. In the same way, when the mind is agitated by endless grievances, it can no longer mirror reality as it is. Every "why is it not better?" becomes another ripple that distorts the stillness within you. A Zen story tells of a monk who crossed a mountain daily to fetch water from a distant stream. One morning, exhausted and bitter, he dropped his bucket and shouted, "This path never ends." An old master nearby smiled and said, "It ends when you stop counting your steps." The monk understood. The complaint was not in the path, it was in his mind. So, what is the antidote? Gratitude. Not the naive denial of hardship, but the conscious turning toward what remains luminous, even in imperfection. When the tea is warm, taste it fully. When the rain falls, listen to its rhythm. When someone visits, see not their lateness, but their presence. Gratitude softens the edges of the world until even pain has texture, not just weight. The Buddha taught, "Contentment is the greatest wealth." To practice gratitude is to become rich in spirit, to dwell in abundance without needing more. Each time you refrain from complaining, you reclaim a piece of your own serenity. So before the next sigh escapes your lips, pause. Ask, "Is this necessary? Is it kind?" Then breathe. Let silence do what words cannot heal the noise within, for a grateful heart, like a calm pond, reflects everything yet clings to nothing. Part 2. talking only about illness. There is a quiet sorrow that comes when illness becomes the only story we tell. Of course, the body changes, pain visits like an old acquaintance, the joints ache, sleep becomes lighter, and breath sometimes shorter. But when every conversation becomes a catalogue of symptoms, we begin to mistake our suffering for our identity. And people, though they care, start to feel the heaviness of that fog. The Buddha taught, "The body is afflicted, but the mind need not be. Pain is inevitable, attachment to pain is not. When we cling to our ailments, we feed them with our attention. We repeat them until they become the center of who we think we are. Yet you are not your illness. You are the awareness that sees it, the space in which both pain and relief arise and fade." I once met an old woman in a small temple in Kyoto. Her hands were twisted with arthritis, yet she moved with such grace that it was almost a meditation. When I asked if she suffered much, she smiled. "The pain is loud in my fingers, but quiet in my heart." That was her practice, to let the body ache, but not let the heart echo. Illness is a teacher, not a punishment. It humbles us, slows us down, asks us to listen to our limits, to our breath, to impermanence itself. When we speak of it, let it be not a performance of despair, but a moment of truth and connection. Yes, this body hurts, but I am still grateful for this breath. After sharing your struggle, turn the gaze outward. Ask about another's joy. Recall a moment of beauty, the scent of tea, the laughter of your grandchild, the memory of a dawn long ago. These are not distractions, they are medicine. The Buddha said, "Whatever you frequently think upon, that will become the inclination of your mind." Speak too long of sickness, and the world becomes a hospital. Speak of resilience, and the world becomes a temple. So let your words be like gentle hands, acknowledging pain, yet also offering warmth. Because people are drawn not to the body that never ached, but to the spirit that never gave up shining. Part 3. Refusing to listen. There is a kind of arrogance that wears the mask of wisdom, the belief that because one has lived long, one already knows. But true wisdom, as the Buddha reminded us, is not found in accumulation. It is found in openness. "The fool who knows he is a fool," he said, "is wise to that extent. But the fool who thinks he is wise is the true fool indeed." As we grow older, it is tempting to mistake years for understanding. We interrupt, we lecture, we dismiss. "I've seen it all," we say, not realizing that this very thought closes the gate to seeing anything new. The moment the mind declares, "I know," learning stops. The cup overflows, no tea can enter. A Zen master once poured tea for his student until the cup spilled over the table. The student cried, "It's full." The master smiled. "Yes, and so are you. How can I show you the way unless you first empty your cup?" Listening is the art of emptying the cup, of meeting life as if for the first time, without the clutter of conclusions. When you truly listen, something miraculous happens. Silence begins to speak. In that silence, understanding blooms without effort. You begin to hear not only the words but the pauses between them, the space where another person's soul quietly reveals itself. Listening is not passive. It is an act of love. It says, "You matter enough for me to be still." The Buddha's disciples were known not for how much they spoke, but for how deeply they listened to the cries of the world, to the stillness of their own hearts. To listen without judgment is to offer freedom. It allows others to be, without the need to fix or prove. So, in your later years, when the urge to advise arises, pause. Let your breath be the first answer. Ask gently, what is this person truly trying to say? Then listen with your whole being, eyes, heart, and silence. For the wise do not need to speak much, their presence itself is a teaching, and in that stillness, where pride dissolves and curiosity returns, you will discover something timeless, that listening is not the act of hearing others, but of awakening yourself. Part 4. Neglecting personal hygiene. There is a quiet dignity in cleanliness, not the vanity of appearances, but the reverence of care. When we let our bodies decay in neglect, when clothes hang unwashed and breath grows sour, it is not age that speaks, it is forgetfulness of self-respect. People may not tell you, but they feel it, a heaviness in the air, a silent withdrawal, not because they judge, but because something sacred has been abandoned, the simple act of honoring this body, this vessel of life. The Buddha taught, this body, though fragile and impermanent, is the boat to cross the ocean of life. We care for it not because we believe it will last forever, but because it allows consciousness to bloom, to wash, to comb the hair, to wear clean clothes. These are not shallow rituals, they are meditations of respect. Each stroke of the comb, each drop of water is a whisper, I am still here. I still honor this breath. There is a story of a Zen monk who spent hours every morning sweeping the monastery courtyard, even when no one was watching. A young novice once asked, why clean so much when dust always returns? The monk smiled, because each time I sweep, the mind becomes clear again. Cleanliness, then, is not about erasing dust forever. It is about tending to clarity, moment by moment. In old age, when the world becomes smaller, when friends visit less, and the mirror grows unfamiliar, the temptation is to let go, to say, what does it matter now? But that is precisely when it matters most. Cleanliness is not about impressing others. It is about awakening dignity. It is the silent statement, I am still worthy of care. Even monks who own nothing but a robe and a bowl keep them spotless, not for pride, but for mindfulness. The robe becomes a reminder this life, though brief, deserves attention. So when you bathe, do it slowly. Feel the warmth of water as gratitude. When you dress, do it with intention, as though you were preparing to meet the sacred because you are. The sacred is life itself, flowing through you still. Remember, to care for your body is to bow to existence. To stay clean is not vanity, it is virtue. A pure heart, a clear mind, and a cared-for body, these three form the fragrance of quiet dignity. Part 5. Living in the past. There is a gentle sadness that comes when the heart refuses to leave yesterday. Things were better back then, we say, clinging to memories like a lantern whose oil has long burned out. The stories of the past become our refuge and, unknowingly, our prison. We begin to measure the present against ghosts, and in doing so, we turn away from the living moment that is still offering itself to us. The Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. These are not poetic words, they are medicine. The mind that clings to the past cannot breathe fully now. It keeps replaying what was, like a song that no longer fits the rhythm of life. Once, a Zen master was seen laughing quietly at an old photograph of his younger self. A student asked, "Do you miss those days?" The master shook his head. "That man was real, but he no longer lives here. Why should I miss him? I am busy being alive now." His wisdom was simple. Nostalgia is beautiful only when it doesn't steal our presence. It is not wrong to remember. The past is a garden of lessons, not a home to return to. You can visit it, smell the flowers of youth, but don't lie down there forever, because while you look backward, the present silently slips away. Your tea grows cold, your child grows older, your own breath moves unnoticed. Each moment is a wave that rises and falls, never to return. To keep saying, the old days were better, is to fight the tide of impermanence. But impermanence, anicca, is not a curse. It is what allows each dawn to arrive new. So honor your memories, but walk with your eyes open. When you tell stories of the past, let them be gifts of wisdom, not chains of comparison. Let the young speak of their world. Listen as if you were learning it for the first time. For a heart rooted in the present is ageless. When you live here, in this breath, in this now, you carry your past, not as a burden, but as light. And in that light, every moment, even this one, becomes sacred. Part 6. Miserliness and fear of spending. There is a quiet kind of poverty that has nothing to do with money, the poverty of a closed heart. In old age, fear often whispers, "What if I run out? What if I need more?" And so we hold tighter to what we have, to our coins, our possessions, our little securities, believing that by grasping we are protecting ourselves. Yet the Buddha taught, from clinging comes suffering, from release, peace. The more tightly we hold, the more anxious we become. The more we give, the freer we feel. I once met an old man in a small monastery in Chiang Mai. He had very little, just a hut, a bowl, and a smile that could light an entire room. When I asked why he seemed so content, he said, "Because I never keep more than I can give away." Then he laughed softly. "Even my smile, I try not to keep it to myself." That was his secret. Generosity as a way of breathing. True giving is not about the size of the gift, but the openness of the gesture. A cup of tea offered with warmth can heal more than a fortune given with reluctance. When you give freely time, attention, kindness, even a gentle word you say to life, "I trust you will fill me again." In Buddhism, this is called dana, the perfection of generosity. The Buddha described it as the first step toward liberation, because every act of giving loosens the knot of mine. You realize that nothing truly belongs to you, not your wealth, not even your body. You are only a caretaker passing blessings through your hands. People will not remember how much you saved. They will remember how much you shared. The warmth of a meal, the comfort of your words, the light in your eyes when you give without expectation, these linger long after you are gone. So give not recklessly, but joyfully. Let generosity be your final luxury, for the miser's coins grow cold in the dark, but the giver's heart glows even in silence. As the Buddha said, "If beings knew, as I do, the merit of giving and sharing, they would not let a single meal pass without offering." To give is not to lose, it is to return to abundance. The open hand is never empty. Part 7. Gossiping and speaking ill of others. Few poisons spread more quietly than the pleasure of gossip. It begins as something small, a whispered comment, a knowing smile, a story shared under the veil of concern. But every careless word, once released, ripples outward like a stone tossed into still water. And those ripples, though unseen, always return to the one who cast them. The Buddha taught, "A person is not measured by the shape of their body, but by the words they speak." Speech has the power to heal or to harm, to plant seeds of peace or to ignite fires of division. When we speak ill of others, we may believe we are only describing them, but in truth, we are revealing ourselves. The listener will not remember the fault we pointed out. They will remember the bitterness in our tone. I once heard a Zen story about two monks walking in silence. After an hour, one spoke up. "Did you hear what the abbot did?" The other monk smiled gently and said, "I was just enjoying the quiet until you spilled dust into the wind." The first monk frowned. "Dust?" The elder nodded. "Yes, words about others. They never fall cleanly. They always return to your own eyes. To gossip is to breathe dust into our own mind. It clouds perception, it feeds judgment, and it isolates us. No one feels safe around a tongue that cuts. Even those who laugh with you will later guard their silence, fearing they might be next. The Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path includes right speech, words that are true, kind, and timely. Before speaking, ask, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails even one of these, silence is the wiser offering. But right speech is not merely avoiding harm, it is choosing blessing. Speak words that uplift, tell someone you appreciate them. Recall a lesson with humility, share a moment of gratitude. These are the fragrances that linger long after conversation ends. Remember, gossip shrinks the soul, but kindness expands it. As the Buddha said, speak only what brings peace, not what brings regret. Your words are bridges or walls. Choose to build what connects, not what divides. Part 8. Talking too much, listening too little. There is a kind of loneliness that speaks even in the middle of a conversation, the loneliness of not being heard. And sometimes, without realizing it, we are the ones causing it. In old age, we have stories to tell, lessons to share, memories that carry weight. But when every gathering becomes a stage, and every listener an audience, words lose their warmth and turn into walls. The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. To speak mindfully is not to fill the air with sound, but to fill the heart with meaning. When you speak endlessly, refusing to pause, you leave no space for another soul to breathe. You may intend to connect, but you end up standing alone in the echo of your own voice. A Zen master once said to his students, do not mistake sound for communication. He would hold up a bell and strike it once. Listen, he said. The bell speaks only when struck, and even then, its silence afterward is part of its song. The art of conversation is like that. Rhythm, balance, and pause. Speaking and silence completing one another, like inhale and exhale. When we talk too much, we unconsciously make others invisible. Their thoughts retreat, their hearts grow quiet, not out of peace, but out of exhaustion. Yet when we listen, truly listen, something miraculous happens. The other person begins to blossom. They feel seen, and that feeling of being valued and understood is what they will remember long after your words have faded. Try this practice. In your next conversation, imagine your words as stones dropped into a pond. Watch the ripples before dropping another. Notice the space between them, the stillness where understanding grows. Buddhism calls this right speech, but perhaps it is also right silence. Knowing when not to speak is an act of compassion. It allows the other to reveal their truth, and it allows you to meet them in presence, not performance. So, speak gently, briefly, like a candle that offers light without blinding. Then rest in the silence that follows. Because in the end, people don't remember how much you said, they remember how deeply they felt heard in your presence. Part 9. Becoming bitter and negative. There is a heaviness that settles on some hearts with age, a quiet bitterness born from disappointment, betrayal, or dreams left unfinished. Life has not always been kind, and so the tongue grows sharp, the smile fades, and the world begins to look darker than it truly is. But bitterness is not protection, it is corrosion. It eats from within and builds invisible walls around us, pushing away the very love we long for. The Buddha said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent to throw it at another. You are the one who gets burned. Bitterness is that coal. We clutch it thinking it gives us power, but it only scorches the hand that refuses to release it. The mind that lives in resentment becomes a prison cell, its bars made not of iron, but of stories we repeat. They wronged me. Life is unfair. No one understands. I once met an old monk who had lost everything, his family, his home, even his sight. Yet when I asked if he ever felt angry, he laughed softly. "How could I be angry?" he said. "The rain falls on everyone. Some curse it, others plant rice." That is the difference between bitterness and wisdom. One sees the storm as punishment, the other as nourishment. To be wise is not to deny pain, but to let pain teach without turning it into poison. When we choose understanding over resentment, the heart softens again. When we choose laughter over complaint, light enters the cracks of the soul. Buddhism teaches mudita, sympathetic joy, the ability to rejoice even when life gives more to others than to us. To practice mudita is to say, "May all beings be happy," and mean it, even those who once hurt us. That wish dissolves bitterness faster than any medicine. So when cynicism whispers that people cannot change, smile gently and answer, "Then I will be the one who does." Let go of the coal, let compassion cool your palms. For a mind free of bitterness glows naturally, like a lantern in the dark, and others, weary of cold hearts, will be drawn to your warmth. Part 10. Ingratitude. Few things make the heart colder than forgetting to say, "Thank you." Not because the words themselves are magic, but because gratitude is the bridge between souls. Without it, relationships slowly crumble, not from conflict, but from quiet neglect. When we take others' kindness as obligation, their hearts begin to close. They stop calling, stop visiting, stop offering, not out of anger, but because warmth cannot survive where it is never acknowledged. The Buddha taught, "A person of gratitude is rare in the world, but that person is noble." Gratitude is not only a virtue, it is a kind of wisdom. It recognizes impermanence, that nothing, not even a simple gesture, lasts forever. When you bow your head in thanks, you are saying to the universe, "I see this moment. I do not take it for granted." I once visited a small monastery in Sri Lanka. An old monk there had a practice. Every evening before sleep, he would whisper 3 thank yous, one for something that went well, one for something that didn't, and one for something ordinary he had overlooked. When I asked him why, he smiled, "Because gratitude turns even pain into prayer." Old age, without gratitude, becomes a counting of losses, but with gratitude, it becomes a counting of blessings. The body may ache, friends may pass, yet every sunrise, every shared meal, every breath becomes a quiet celebration. Gratitude doesn't deny suffering, it transforms it. It is the alchemy that turns loneliness into connection and scarcity into abundance. When you thank someone, your child for visiting, a stranger for their help, life itself for another morning, you awaken a sacred reciprocity. People are drawn to those who see them, who notice their efforts. Gratitude says, "You matter. This moment matters." And that is what keeps love alive. So let each day end, not with complaint, but with acknowledgement. Whisper your thanks before sleep for the body that still breathes, for the meal that nourished you, for the chance to love and be loved once more. As the Buddha said, let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn much today, at least we learned a little. Gratitude is the quiet miracle of old age. It doesn't change what you have, but it changes the way you see. And in that seeing, everything becomes enough. Part 11. Over-involving in others' lives. There is a fine line between love and control, and many cross it without realizing. Out of care, we interfere. Out of concern, we advise uninvited. Out of fear, we hold too tightly to those we love. But what begins as affection can quietly become a cage. The Buddha taught, attachment brings suffering. Even when attachment wears the mask of love, it binds both giver and receiver. As we age, the urge to protect those we love often grows stronger. We have seen the storms of life, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, and we want to save others from them. But wisdom is not in shielding others from their path. It is in trusting their path to unfold. Each being must walk through their own karma, their own lessons, their own timing. To interfere is to steal the opportunity for their awakening. A Zen master once watched his student struggle to light a fire in the cold. After several failed attempts, the master could have stepped in, but instead he simply said, "I will stay here with you." Hours later, when the fire finally caught, the student looked up, exhausted but smiling. The master bowed and whispered, "Now it is your fire." True compassion sometimes means standing nearby, not fixing, not forcing, but accompanying with presence. Love without control is freedom. Support without intrusion is respect. When we insist, demand, or dictate, we are not giving love, we are asking to be obeyed. But when we listen, when we allow others to make their own choices, even mistakes, our love matures into wisdom. Buddhism teaches upekkha, equanimity, the balance of heart that neither clings nor rejects. It is the stillness that says, "I care deeply, but I trust deeply too." So when you feel the urge to correct your children, to manage your spouse, to guide every detail of another's life, pause, breathe. Ask, am I acting from fear or from trust? Let your care become space, not pressure, because those who feel safe near you will always return. Boundaries are not distance, they are love with clarity. And when love is spacious, it breathes, it grows, it stays. Part 12. Stubbornness and refusal to adapt. To grow old is natural, to grow rigid is optional. The body may stiffen with age, but the mind can remain young, supple, and curious until the final breath. Yet many, in their later years, confuse familiarity with safety. They reject the new, dismiss the unfamiliar, and say with quiet pride, "I don't need these modern things." But behind that pride often hides fear, fear of being left behind, fear of not understanding, fear of losing control. The Buddha taught, just as a snake sheds its skin, we must shed our past again and again. Wisdom is not a fixed possession, it is a living stream. The moment we stop learning, we begin to stagnate. A closed mind is like a sealed jar. Nothing enters, nothing grows, and soon even the water inside goes stale. I once met a retired teacher who refused to touch a smartphone, saying it was nonsense for the young. One day, his granddaughter gently showed him how to send a voice message. The first time he heard her reply, "Good morning, Grandpa, I love you," his eyes filled with tears. That simple act broke decades of distance. He later said, "It wasn't the technology that scared me, it was change itself." Adaptation is not about chasing trends. It is about staying connected to people, to time, to life as it unfolds. The Zen masters call this beginner's mind, approaching each moment as if seeing it for the first time. When you say, "Teach me," instead of "I already know," you step back into the flow of aliveness. Curiosity keeps you young. Stubbornness makes you old long before your time. Every new skill, every unfamiliar idea, every honest question is a doorway to freedom. Refusal, on the other hand, builds walls around the heart. So, be willing to learn again, to laugh at mistakes, to listen to the young, to touch the changing world without fear. In Buddhism, impermanence, anicca, is not to be resisted, but celebrated. Change is life, breathing through you. Let your wisdom be like bamboo, firm in its roots, flexible in its sway. For a tree that refuses to bend in the wind will break, but the one that yields will dance, and in that dance stay forever young. Part 13. Losing self-respect. There is a quiet tragedy more painful than aging itself, the loss of self-respect. It begins subtly, a sigh of defeat, a neglect of appearance, a quiet surrender to helplessness. The body slows, and soon the spirit follows. When one stops caring for oneself, others begin to feel not admiration, but pity. And pity, though gentle, creates distance. People are drawn to strength, not sorrow, to dignity, not despair. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." Self-respect is not pride, it is the recognition of your own sacredness. To stand tall even when the bones ache, to speak with clarity even when the voice trembles, this is not vanity, it is presence. It tells the world, I still honor this life. In the Zen tradition, there is a story of an old monk who, despite his frail body, continued to sweep the temple courtyard every morning. A young novice once begged him to rest. The monk smiled and said, "If I stop sweeping, dust will gather not only on the floor, but in my heart." Self-respect is that daily sweeping, the discipline of caring, not because others are watching, but because you are awake. When we abandon self-care, we silently declare, "I no longer matter." Yet in truth, to respect oneself is to respect the Dharma within. The body, the voice, the gestures, all are expressions of consciousness. Treat them as temples, keep them clean, upright, and sincere. A wise elder once said, "Even if my steps are slow, I walk with purpose. Even if my words are few, I choose them with grace." That is the crown of old age, not youth, not wealth, but dignity. So hold, and your spine like a prayer. Let your eyes rest in kindness, and let your words carry gentleness. These are your robes of honor. They remind others and yourself that though the years have softened your body, they have polished your spirit. As the Buddha taught, in the end, no one saves us but ourselves. Walk with respect for the life still breathing through you, and you will find that even silence commands reverence. For self-respect is the quiet majesty of awakening the crown no age can take away. In the end, aging is not the enemy, forgetting who you truly are is. You are not defined by the number of candles on your cake, but by the light that still burns in your heart. Every wrinkle holds a memory, every scar a lesson, every breath a chance to begin again. The Buddha once said, "Each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most." So begin today, not with regret, but with reverence. Let go of the bitterness that hardened your smile. Release the pride that silenced your tenderness. Walk back to simplicity, where peace was never lost, only hidden beneath years of fear and habit. You cannot control how others see you, but you can choose how you meet them, with warmth instead of judgment, gratitude instead of demand, curiosity instead of complaint. When your heart softens, so does the world around you. People will not love you for your perfection, but for your presence, for the calm, wise stillness you radiate when you finally stop trying to control everything and simply be. And perhaps that is the final teaching of age, that love, respect, and peace cannot be chased, only cultivated, breath by breath. If this reflection has touched something within you, share it not just online, but through the way you speak, listen, and live today. Leave a in the comments to affirm your vow to grow lighter, not harder, with age. Remember, You are not fading, you are ripening. Let this be your time of stillness, of dignity, of quiet wisdom. The world still needs the light that only you can give.